Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on only one theme, awareness talk series. My name is Dr. Mugdha Lele, and on behalf of the TechX.in team at Venture Center, I'm happy to host the third wave of our only one theme, awareness talk series on innovation management. I welcome to the 18th and final talk in this third wave. So we are after this talk today, we are going to take a short pause and we will resume the fourth wave probably in the month of September with a fresh set of topics. So today, at the end of today's session, we are again going to take feedback and we ask you for topics which you wish to listen about in the next wave. So please feel free to suggest us topics which are not covered up till now and which are of interest to you. So today's topic in this only one theme talk series is reducing and dealing with technology disputes. And our speaker for today is Hasit Seth. So welcome Hasit for this session. Let me briefly introduce you today. Hasit works as a counsel in the Bombay High Court. His key focus is on arbitrations, civil and writ litigation. He has negotiated many deals, most of them involving technology and related services. Hasit has formerly studied negotiations at Harvard Law School's program on negotiation, famously called PILPON. Over the past 20 years, he's been a partner at a law firm, general counsel for an MNC, a startup founder, and has worked in the US with two law firms doing patent litigation and prosecution. His computer science graduation is followed by LLB and LLM with a gold medal from Mumbai University. Hasit later did a LLM in IP from University of New Hampshire in the US. His interest areas include law, technology, deal negotiation, economics, and art. With this brief introduction, please join me in welcoming Hasit to this session and handing over the session to you.
Thank you very much, Mugdha. Am I audible, visible?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. So I'm speaking from Kuala Lumpur. So I don't know the internet. I hope it works. I mean, all right. So thank you very much for the warm introduction. We'll get started without much ado into the presentation. I am sharing it. Right. Yeah. I think so. And I need to do it slideshow from start. All right. So, good evening, rather late, good afternoon to everybody there. And what I wanted to focus on, see, if we think, when I thought about the topic for the very first time, I was thinking that uh, technology disputes from whose viewpoint? From the viewpoint of the inventors, the startup founders, large company management, because everybody's viewpoint would be very different from where what they are involved in. So I've tried to normalize across these different disputes with three particular kind of case studies that are involved. But that doesn't mean that these are the only kind of technology disputes. There are like hundreds of kinds as such, and they would be mixed with what we would typically think of as business disputes. All right, so let's see. So these are like the broad three categories. Instead of trying to cram in a lot of information and data, I just thought focusing on a few things would be fine. Because in the age of ChatGPT and Gemini and all those things, anybody can put the right prompts and get the answer. So that's what, like, if you want a list of technology disputes in last 10 years, uh, I I I put it into like Grok and Gemini and all this, and you get that list. I mean, I don't think so it would add to any great value if I just repeated what's in the list through the slides. So that's not what I wanted to do. But these are the three things, the three pegs around which I wanted this to talk. Uh, to what I want to out underline is that this doesn't mean that tech companies have only tech disputes or some peculiar kind of disputes. They are business entities like any other business entities. They are subject to all kinds of regular business challenges, even if you are not into tech business. And so here is a list of those routine disputes which most companies, tech companies, or other companies who are broadly in some kind of space similar to this one would also face. So, principally, it's about employment disputes. Tech tends to be very employment heavy. I'm not just speaking about the software kind of companies which are, I mean, what's the input, right? I mean, their laboratory is their computer as such, and whatever they develop is on their computer. So the main like the uh, productive part of a software oriented company or a software oriented startup is essentially people, people who are doing programming or a mixed role between business and programming. So the employment disputes tend to be very high for them because employees are what is their main asset or liability, whatever you want to think, based on the particular phase the company is going through. Then there are payment disputes. These are across the world, they tend to be a problem for the simple reason that in a sale purchase kind of dispute, it doesn't happen that you get every time 100% advance. I mean, there are only few handful of industries and handful of businesses which can command 100% advance because their product is so well known or is so much in demand that people would be ready to pay 100% advance because they would be sure of what they are going to get in. But service contracts, long-term contracts, contracts with multiple components, milestones, etc., nobody is going to pay 100% upfront advance. They are going to look at performance, they are going to approve performance, and all kinds of contractual terms would be there before the payments could be released, because whoever is buying would like to verify whether they got what they were paying for or not. There would be consumer disputes of all kinds. If you are a consumer facing company, uh, like somebody like Amazon is a tech company in a sense because they run Amazon cloud and other Amazon services, AWS. But for the goods it sells, it's a consumer company. On AWS also, it's kind of a consumer company because people are renting the cloud space from them. So they would be naturally consumer disputes, even if you're a business. But if you're buying it for doing your business, then it is a kind of a consumer transaction, and it has its own code system and its own this thing, which even takes them out of arbitration process. Property disputes, what most people don't realize, that sooner or later, as a company, you are going to own assets and likely immovable assets, right? Uh, Although I understand that for tech startups and tech companies, the idea is that your uh, OPEX should come from your revenues. The operational expenses should come for the revenues to put a discipline on the burn rate and all those things, I mean, as such. But sooner or later, as the company goes on to mature stage, it is going to own some factory, it is going to own some laboratory, it is going to own some offices, and that will bring in some property disputes. There will be regulatory disputes. I'm just running through them for the reason that this is not what I want to talk about. So that's why the slide is up front. But I do wanted to give an idea that but tech companies are not immune to non-tech company disputes. Like any other business, you are subject to all other disputes which all other companies face. So there would be regulatory disputes related to SEBI, FEMA, if you are dealing with foreign exchange. Indian foreign exchange laws are Byzantine, as said. Although we have moved away from criminality, but try buying even a small property outside or incorporating a company outside India, and you will and when you are based here as a subsidiary, I mean, outside India, and you'll come to know that how complicated the system is as such. So if the money is coming in, then the systems are very easy. If you're just getting in revenues, then it's very easy, because it gets converted at the payment point from the bank, and it's INR, and government can tax and track everything very easily. But if it's money going out, then they can't track it beyond the point when it goes outside the SWIFT payment system. And that's when the problem occurs, because that's when they cannot trace the money trail, and they essentially are looking at the reporting company, which is the Indian parent, who has a subsidiary abroad, to actually ask them and tell them for declarations, what did they do with that dollar, amount. So there is that liberalized remittance scheme and other things up to a quarter of $1 million. But that's theory. Like any foreign exchange expenditure, government's going to ask you to track, particularly if you have a permanent establishment presence here in India. If you are a foreign company just doing some transactions here without any presence here, and you want to establish something outside. So that's why a lot of Indian startups who uh, have parallel entities, they are just incorporate there in name of some friends or somebody, like the fund which is funding them or something, so that they don't have the hassles of this reporting and control. If you are dealing with government entities, then expect, some day there might be government disputes, because they are highly regulated entities. They are audited by the comptroller and auditor general based on how much of the public funds they deal with. Uh, so there will be some or the other regulatory issues that you may have to face. I'm not saying you have to face. Things have become better and better over the years, as such, and government entities do understand that the sectors which are very risk oriented, like startups and all that, it's not necessary, or it's not even practical to actually account for each rupee spent, and although they are public funds in some way or other, and then get why was this spent and all that. So it's may not be possible. So they every year tends to get better. But if you are into filing tenders and competing for government contracts, and other thing, if that's the part of your business model, then be ready to deal with a lot of these disputes. And more than that, it is like the sudden cancellation of the contracts that could be a challenge. And if you have relied on that, you have like a letter of intent or a letter of allotment, because you are the winning bidder, L1 bidder, as they say, the lowest cost bidder, or the bidder who is chosen for lowest cost and lowest, other factors. Suddenly you will find that, the whole process is withdrawn because somebody made complaints and other things. So it's if you are in this sector, then it's this thing. Private sector tends to be even more erratic because they are even less answerable. The government disputes, because the writ petition is a method by which the courts, if the other entity is the government entity, you can go to the courts for that kind of arbitrariness. But private sector is not even that. Then you'll have to drag them to arbitration or courts, which is even more complicated as such. So I think these kind of disputes come in when you become like a medium-sized company and a mature company, maybe 5-10 years down the line, or early on also it's possible if that is the business model that you want to engage in. Uh, there are shareholder disputes. These are quite common. As we saw today, it was in news that Indigo, like the co-founder, sold just a small single-digit percentage of his shares for, I think, 2.5 or 3.5% for 6,000 crores. And both the co-founders had gone through a very uh, acrimonious kind of arbitration proceedings, which is all in the public domain. I'm not telling anything secret as such. So shareholder disputes are not unknown, and they can happen from in the smallest to the largest entities. and there could be unique kind of like shareholder issues or contractual issues. So for example, there was this company which ran this big bazaar, which was that future I mean future coupons was one of the entities which had taken investment from Amazon, and where they had a contract clause saying that there was a negative list of people who could invest in future coupons. Future Coupons itself was an investor into like other future entity which ran Big Bazaar, but and Reliance wanted to take investment, and Future itself wanted Reliance to invest. But Amazon raised a dispute in under the Singapore International Arbitration Center rules because the contract had a SIAC arbitration clause, and the arbitration ensured there was an emergency arbitrator award saying that order in a sense saying that you cannot deal with these like I mean Future cannot go ahead with the transaction with Reliance. Well, I mean with what these big entities are. I mean, what happened was that overnight all the leases for the big bazaars, I mean, when they were coming to an end, the owners of those premises did not renew those leases. And instead, what was seen by the customers is that the next day the name was Reliance Mart because the Reliance had already entered into lease agreements with those owners. So complete bottom of future coupons disappeared, futures Big Bazaar disappeared, and what remains in the arbitration is nothing because there is nothing to fight about because the business is gone as such. So these kind of disputes are not unknown as such. Joint venture partnership disputes are also, I mean, they occur quite frequently as such. And mostly it's about control and money and future direction because both the partners cannot see which direction the joint venture should take. But they've been very successful joint ventures and partnerships also over time. So we cannot say that this model does not work or is full risk prone. It's not actually. But it's how it's structured and what are the intentions of the partners, like in any partnership or relationship. That's what matters. Then you have management control disputes. It's about like it's not about that anybody wants to give up their shareholding, but which we saw in the Tata Sons issue with Cyrus Mistry, the Mistry family, which owns I think around 16 to 18% of the parent entity, and like it's about like who will control it because. The family itself, only the trust control the main, like the parent entity Tata Sons, where the Mistries are the majority shareholders. We all know all this from public domain, nothing new. There are also investor disputes coming in via the private equity or venture capital funds, etc. Again, it's about the direction the company should take, and the founders have their own ideas, the investors have their own ideas. When everything is successful, and that's fine, but otherwise, it's and we are increasingly seeing in large entities debt-related disputes. So, Byju's, for example, has raised a lot of debt, and right now it's in insolvency proceeding because they could not pay. But there are all kinds of disputes around that is possible. So there are lots of people like these instruments of convertible instruments that it is debt which could be converted into equity. But that is even a trickier species because you just don't know when the trigger would be pulled, and to seek control, the debt would be sought to be converted into equity. So anybody who's taking in the investments through that route needs to be very circumspect that the control and you as the founders may you feel that you have it all the time because you've only raised debt, but no, you have raised optionally convertible debt. And if it is based very well structured and there are like milestones and key situations when this can be like triggered, then it's fine. Otherwise, you, I mean, are looking at situation where this could be triggered. Anyway, coming to these typical test disputes, there are more categories than these three, but I've just taken them as examples. I'll talk about some others also. But one thing as a foundational issue is and think about uh, that who created this technology. It's an amazing thing that nobody's worried until the tech is created, but as soon as some tech is created, which is valuable, and that the sign of that is that lots of patents are filed around it, or lots of high impact or even few high impact patents are filed around it, and suddenly everybody jumps in that we are the inventors, or we have the rights to the invention because we created it, and so on and so forth, or it was created on our own, our initiative and all that. So that's the kind of this thing. And I'm not even talking here about the mass scale creation issue which we saw with OpenAI. So OpenAI recently, the what's known as Chat GPT as their popular front end to their models, is the Studio Ghibli issue, right? I mean, Chat GPT had nothing to do with Studio Ghibli, which created that cartoons. I mean, cartoon movies, animated movies, not cartoon movies. And suddenly, Studio Ghibli just ran through those movies as videos and created a model by which anybody can create a Ghibli character, look-alike Ghibli character. So, and you had millions and millions of people like creating Ghibli characters, which if you are an anime or an animation fan, you would know that Studio Ghibli hates technology. They do all their like artwork by hand. And that is like 24 frames per second. So cell animation done on cellulose, that acetate paper, transparencies and by hand and all that. So all that was plagiarized by tech. So I'm not even talking about that mass scale creation issue, which is the current big issue, that who created this tech, and do they have rights to it? Because it seems that uh, one or two thefts and all that can be punished, but if you do it at a mass scale, then you cannot be punished. I mean, that's what copyright story has been all over the years, when it always has faced new technology, whether it was internet in the past years, whether it was music being created into like converted, ripped into digital domain, or now with all the any kind of media essentially being open to be put into a model, and it could be used in any way possible. I mean, the hybridization and adaptation of content is at a, I mean, the huge exponential possibility today. You just don't know which element would be mixed up and created with, used to create what other new element. So the transformation process, unlike the old technology, is also not known now. So I mean, I'll keep those issues aside. So this is one issue which I think most people know about it. It's slightly dated, but it was of these Winklevoss twins, and there was this Divya Narendra. So three of these people actually had hired Zuckerberg, with whom they claimed that they had an oral contract, whereby they asked Zuckerberg to develop a software called Connect You. Now it is in public domain that Mark Zuckerberg actually had tried to create many of the kind of preparatory products to Facebook. I mean, they were called like Slam Book and this and that. I mean, he was always trying to do these things, but it's that disconnect you contract, or something like of that kind, that actually got him into like the zone of creating what would be eventually Facebook. But instead of connect you, he ended up developing the Facebook itself in PHP. And then the Winklevoss twins, like sued, including with Divya, they sued Zuckerberg, and there was a settlement. The settlement was supposed to be confidential, but the law firm which actually represented Winklevoss actually disclosed it in one of their I think regulatory disclosures or something as a press release or some one of the bragging materials that you get from various law firms, that the settlement was worth around $65 million. And the Winklevoss twins actually sued their own law firm, which had fought against Zuckerberg for breach of confidentiality and all that. And I think they lost eventually. But here, the settlement, I think, for Zuckerberg was never linked to what was the stock market price for Facebook, because Zuckerberg's stand was that we never entered into a contract to develop the Facebook, which I developed on my own. What you asked to me to develop was something like Connective, which never got developed. So if you sue me for not actually developing what we had orally agreed, that's a different issue. But if you are suing me that I created something else and you have rights to it, and that's where your the dispute, which the heading says that who created the tech. So Zuckerberg says, he said his stand was that I created FB, but that's because I wanted to create it, not because we orally spoke about developing Connect You as a product. So anyway, they got this settlement, and then as we all know, it's also public domain that Winklevoss twins were one of the biggest champions, are still one of the biggest champions of the cryptocurrency. So they became early investors in cryptocurrency from the money they earned from Zuckerberg. I mean, I think they were very rich anyway, but this money helped them to do whatever they wanted to do. So that's like the creation dispute, that who owns the tech. This is just a popular example which everybody could follow. That's why I picked up. But you have all kinds of disputes about who created it, and one of the popular situations is where you have joint inventors or co-inventors. The US patent law, both the co-inventors have equal rights to develop that technology, unless exploit that technology if they are co-inventors, unless there is a contractual arrangement by which it is decided that all right, either of us can exploit it or one of us can exploit it, and this would be the revenue sharing, or whatever arrangement they want. But that contractual wrapper of an revenue sharing arrangements needs to be like managed. All right, so that's a popular category. This one I found was an interesting case, I mean, situation, whereby the all-powerful Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, if anybody knows anything about the Wisconsin research, this is an alumni research foundation which owns most of the Wisconsin patents, I mean, which come out of the Wisconsin's research, and it negotiates on behalf of the university with all kinds of licensing deals and joint venture like agreements and joint licensing situations. So it's a very powerful licensing organization, and it has a lot of biotech inventions in its kitty as such. So this was this Xenon Pharmaceuticals. I think it's a Canadian company which had actually funded this research for a cholesterol lowering enzyme. Uh, you probably know more about this Stereocol COA, but we all know that these lifestyle disease drugs, I mean, whether Ozempic and other things, Wegovy and other things which we hear about today, which are an alternative to bariatric surgery and reduce for use for weight reduction. A little before that, the cholesterol lowering drugs were the blockbuster lifestyle disease drugs that were on the market. So this must have been a hot drug in the time when this dispute happened in early 2000s. So what Xenon did was they had a deal with the WARF where they agreed to pay 7.5% licensing fee for any revenues that would be generated out of this research. But banking on their contract that they have rights to it, they made a joint patent application, but they went ahead and did a licensing deal with Novartis for this cholesterol lowering, because this is a race, as anybody who is into like patenting world, and particularly biotech patenting or biopatenting, a way of related to pharma, because there is such a small window in which you have to make money, a couple of years to 3 years to just to get the US patent. And then at the lower end you have like Hackswatchman and all those guys who want the generic guys, and who or bioequivalent guys who want to, like, create it, and the policy allows them to start early preparation for a drug or like a particular technique going off patent. So you literally have like a decade of practical decade of exploitation of the patent. And not to forget, there is a regulatory process, right? God knows how much time it could take as such. So in this situation, it might the Xenon guys might have made a decision that let's chuck it, right? I mean, we need money, so let's sign a deal with Novartis as such. And the whole this arrangement itself was challenged, and it went number of times to like different court levels up till Supreme Court in number of like different technical issues litigation. But ultimately, Wharf won. I mean, and they won substantially. I think they had asked for a large amount, but ultimately, I think they got 300 million USD for this kind of arrangement. I have not put it on the slide because there isn't like a good source where the number is mentioned. But I have actually included Wharf's own press release as a source. So where most of the things, whatever they could disclose publicly, is disclosed as such. So that's the situation. So here, uh, jointly owned technology, who can exploit it and to what extent, that becomes a huge challenge. I mean, and it's also I don't think so. The WARF here didn't want the technology not to be licensed or expanded, but they just I mean, they were just being excluded from the deal. Now, in most cases, that such blatant exclusion may not be the situation, but it's just the licensing strategy that would be up for a dispute, because both two or three co-partners would be there. They just would have different plans. I mean, as such, particularly if one is a research only entity, one is like a manufacturing entity, one is like an entity which out licenses drugs and all those tech, but it also has some licensing muscle if required, sorry, manufacturing muscle if required, that they could make it themselves. So in all this matrix of circumstances, nobody knows when these projects start, the research started, what is even the possibility of something valuable coming out of it, due to the enormous number of variables and things that could go wrong or just not happen. But when things become valuable, that's when all this comes into picture. And um, it's just matter of uh, keeping a very tight perspective. And I think Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation is one entity to look up to, that how aggressively they have defended their patent rights and what. And I think as a university, and that's why they have so much of rights, right? I mean, unless you get money to fund research and in the direction that you want to fund it, how are things going to come up as such? And given currently, the US government is slashing grants here and there. They have slashed grants for, like, I think National Institute of Health also, for cancer research and whatnot, as we all read in news. You just don't know which grant gets cancelled. So that's also not a source on which most people can rely now in the times to come. So then you need your own revenues, and own revenues are subject to all these kind of issues. All right. You can type the questions in the chat box or whatever the organizers think is the way. But I'll just run through these things and then we can spend some time on questions as such.
Yeah, Asit,
Yes, yes. Yes,
yeah,
Dr.
we're
Prabhu.
about half an hour into the thing, so
Yes.
maybe you can speed up a little. I mean,
Yes, yes,
I'll
yes.
I'll
So
collect all the questions and take them up at
yes, yes,
the
yes.
end.
I'll just need 5-7 minutes more to wrap up. so that we have time for questions. So this is Elon Musk dispute with OpenAI, which is a classic example of commercialization versus control. So Elon's actually put in $100 million when OpenAI wanted to Sam Altman and others wanted to start it as a non-profit entity, and I mean Elon was also on board for it as such, to create a large language model and get the compute resources for and all that. So then after ChatGPT was released and it became like an overnight sensation and success. So then Sam Altman said, and the management of OpenAI board, and there were like disputes when he was kicked out and then brought in and all that, where ultimately they have Microsoft as the benefactor and also providing them the compute resources required through their Azure and all the engines, the large resources that they have. But ultimately, they want to make it a for-profit entity, and Elon has sued them, and they have sued Elon in return for interfering in their business and all this. So the underlying dispute is definitely about tech, in the sense that who wins or who gets ahead in the AI race, but it is played out as a business dispute about who controls it and all that. And Elon had another dispute with the in the Twitter saga that you had seen. He said, "I want to buy it," and then he backed out, and then Twitter sued him in Delaware court, and then he said, "Okay, I will buy it," for whatever sum that he had agreed and all that. So these are also tech disputes of one or another kind, but they are like about control and like who controls the commercialization. Then you have so these are three main these things. In terms of avoiding disputes, I mean there are, you could do like a zillion things to avoid disputes and still have disputes despite doing all the precautionary stuff. But here are some heuristics or thumb rules. No to oral contracts. They are valid but very hard to prove. You can say yes, we agreed to it, we shook hands on it, but sorry, that's very hard to prove. You need well drafted contracts. It's not a formality because that's what you bank upon. I mean, if you tell me that this is my rights flow from this particular contract, then it has to be properly drafted, because otherwise you literally will have no rights. I mean, or at least have no very weak rights that cannot be enforced. Have a practice of recording discussion in emails. You had an oral discussion, shoot an email that this is what we discussed in the call that you have. And particularly if you don't have much to lose, then I think this is a good thing to do, because this is never going to come back to bite you. So if you look on Twitter and other, there are sites about tech leaks, which are email exchanges essentially in antitrust proceedings. They are published where whatever things that Zuckerberg wrote or Elon Musk wrote to each other, and they have come out in the discovery part of the litigation, and you can see like all kind of things have come back to bite all these top companies. But if you are a small company, you don't have much to lose by those emails being shown in court. But not recording them has a huge downside, because it's my word against your word. Which word court should believe in? Don't send attachments without descriptive email. That is the biggest headache we have as lawyers, because it's said that, oh, we sent an attachment, but I mean, so what? I mean, what did your email say about it? What did you think, and why were you sending attachment? Cannot be guessed from the just the attachment being attached and sent via email. Yes, it will prove that it was sent because it was sent through an email. But what was the context? That would be completely lost. So please type the context in your email, and that's what covering emails are for. Sign formal contracts with all the formality required, and also know your other side. I know all of us said KYC, but KYOS is what I would recommend, that at least get to know your other side very well. Just that everybody says this is a big company and we thought we are signing up with a big company. Well, big companies can also be very mean and think like a small company when it comes to protecting their own interests. They are all here to make money, right? There is always room to negotiate. So when anybody says there is no room to negotiate, that's just a lie. There's always room to negotiate with everybody. Tactics are a part of the game. Play it. I mean, you cannot say that all right, I earlier was in a academic world or much simpler world of startups. Now we are in a mature company and all these tactics are being played, and I am not trained for it, or this is not what I had expected. I'm sorry, you are in business, right? I mean, tactics are part of the game and you have to learn how to play it. Document contract performance too. It's not just important to have the contract signed and being done nicely, but all the performance of the contract needs to be documented also, because it just makes us lawyers mad that nothing is on paper of what you are saying now, that this is what we thought we were doing and this is what the understanding with the parties had. Well, if it's not documented, there is no way to get to know it, and getting it proved in evidence is like very hard, usually very hard. All right, coming to resolving disputes, short slide. You have various methods. You have regular courts, you have commercial courts, uh, you have alternative dispute resolution. It's called alternative because it's alternative to the courts. You have arbitration, which generates a binding decision. Yet there are several levels of challenges. People think that the contract says the decision in the arbitration shall be final and binding, but no, it is open to various kinds of challenges. Mediation is very interesting. India now has a act, special law for mediation, where if you have a settlement, mediation settlement recorded into a like a settlement agreement, the courts will enforce it as a decree of the court, as if it's an order of the court. So it is primarily consensual. Anybody can walk out of the mediation anytime. Nobody can force anybody to mediate. The mediator herself does not have any power to force any mediated solutions on the parties. Uh, and you have expert determination as one of the procedures. If you go to WIPO, Arbitration Mediation Center, they claim that they are specialists in technology and intellectual property related disputes, and they offer something called WIPO Good Offices system, whereby even if there is a clause, WIPO arbitration clause, or it's not there, ultimately WIPO would use its good offices to try and bring about the other party to either to the negotiating table, or bring them to create agree, make them agree to an arbitration or mediation or something, or an expert determination. They are big on expert determination, that it is a non-binding determination by an expert that this is what is the loss suffered, or this is what the remedial measure should be. Then it's up to the parties to accept it. If they think it is a fair and square opinion, then they'll accept it, and then things like will be resolved that way. But a lot of time we see that's not what the parties want. Parties want a full-blown fight, and that's when arbitration comes into picture, or courts come into picture. So thank you for the listening to this lawyer-like presentation, which is last in your series of presentations. But I'll turn over to Dr. Premnath for questions.
Thank you, Hasit. I think maybe I'll start the questions with something which are relevant to especially academic and research
Sure.
organizations who are licensing to, say, companies, and then we can take it from there. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So maybe um, we can start by um, this question of, I mean, there is a question which is specific to especially the kind of arbitration clauses that people put in. Um, there's also, I mean, there are various options as you listed for alternate mechanisms. How would you suggest? What would you suggest is a good staging of those mechanisms, and what is better in order to manage costs better? Remember that academic research organizations may not have the muscle, financial muscle to do it, right?
Yes,
Definitely not like WARF.
no,
So,
no, no. Wharf is actually a shark. I mean, there's a different level altogether, and they're very capable. That's, I mean, because they've been doing it since years. That's a different thing. What I highly recommend is a mediation, because mediation is very low cost. So if you have a good mediator with the parties, they may or may not be a subject matter expert, but if they can get parties to do a mediated solution, and usually what I have seen from experience also is large companies don't want to fight with academia because they rely on them for future also, right? I mean, you can't have I mean, one you can win a battle, but you lose out the war, right? I mean, particularly if you are fight against you is a very well established lab which has a pipeline of inventions and other things. So I strongly recommend mediation as a way to resolve it. Now, what typically happens is that mediation is put as a pre-arbitration step, that you must have it as a pre-arbitration step, and a lot of people will just try to do posturing and not actually enter into mediation with good intentions. I mean, as such, the government of India has a number of policies to promote mediation now, from finance and law ministries and all that. There are circulars and GRs, but ultimately, I think if parties don't like honestly engage with mediation, they don't seem to estimate. Even the large companies, they don't seem to estimate what's the but for situation, that but for finding a solution in this mediation, what is our alternative? Because the situation is, even if you win in arbitration, you have an award in your favor, you are going to court to execute it, you can't execute against the government. I mean, that is a reality. I mean, what will you attach, right? I mean, you can't attach government buildings and all that. So there's really no way to enforce it. So what is the win worth it? I mean, as such. So
Yeah.
that,
No, especially not-for-profit signals a lot of things if the not-for-profit is being hurt.
yes,
But
yes.
that said, recently there has been a case where the government has felt the pinch of an arbitration clause, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that has basically
In fact, this
so
is all in public domain. That I'll just give two examples. One, the National Highway Authority of India, which builds highways, has more than 80,000 crore worth of awards against it pending in the court, which it has challenged, and there is interest running on it. So you can imagine the amount of burden that the government is looking at. It's now a systemic risk. Earlier, like some ministries, some budget, 10, 20 crore dispute here and there, nothing's going to, government's not going to even bother about it. But now it's a systemic risk. I mean, this is a very large amount. So that's one thing. And second thing, in the Delhi Metro kind of case, because the dispute resolution itself takes a long time, the interest burden was way more than the actual amount awarded, and it was in thousands of crores. So Supreme Court ultimately came up with a curative kind of procedure, despite the award being upheld 3 4 times. And it is an award by three railway engineers, three very senior railway officials, not by the retired judges or this thing. But so these are like challenges. So I must mention, for the sake of completeness, that if commercial courts are involved, so even if you don't have to put that as a clause in your contract, but if there is no arbitration clause and the dispute will go to commercial court, then by law you are required to do a pre-suit mediation, unless you are asking for interim relief. That's an exception, which eventually the government wants to remove it, that too, that even if you need interim relief, then you still will need to go to mediation, because mediation is seriously thought of as a solution before you get into a very long drawn dispute. So to come to the crux of your question, that what would be the best thing to do, I would suggest a very strong attempt at mediation, and could
yeah.
go through an institution. So government itself has created a number of institutions. For example, there is IIAC in Delhi, which used to be ICADR. It's been created by a parliamentary statute, and its rules are also notified in government, and they have mediation also in arbitration. So that kind of a clause can be put in, that IIAC will give us a mediator, and will try and resolve the dispute through mediation. I think that is the best case scenario.
So it goes mediation, arbitration, and then court,
No,
right?
actually,
No?
arbitration technically ends with arbitration. It does not have to
Okay.
go to court. But one of the
Okay.
losing sides will always challenge the award, and that's how the courts come into picture. Otherwise, technically, it's not supposed to go to court.
Okay. And there is a question about mediation itself. Like, how does it actually work in terms of how does one find
Yes,
a mediator? What's the cost, time frame of
yes.
mediation?
So, most of the high courts and most of even district courts have now mediate like a list of mediators and very active mediation centers. So, like for example, Bombay Court has a very active mediation center. Even like ILSCA in Pune is kind of approved as an mediation center, and
It's
they
related to ILS, right?
ILS
ILS.
college. You can see it
Yeah.
at T
Yeah.
junction of Prabhat
Yeah.
and Romac. So they are also like an approved kind of a mediation nominating body for the Bombay Accord and all that. So there are a number of these government sources where government bodies would be very comfortable seeking a mediator, and mediator are paid by the hour, and the effort kind of justify because the amount is not that large. Experienced mediator could charge say something like 7-10,000 per hour, but then it's very hard work and it's very visible to the parties because mediator is constantly engaging either with both the parties in the same room or with the individual parties. This is something different which arbitrators or any other dispute resolution process cannot do. Is mediators can talk to parties individually and keep things confidential what has been told to them in confidential by one party when it is
Hmm.
flagged that so let typical pricing dispute, right, that what was to be the price. I mean, so both the parties can privately tell the mediator this is what we expect as the minimum or maximum, try and bring us into the zone of this thing. I mediated the dispute between two co-founders of a yoga retreat in Kochi. And I mean, both the parties were in very bad situation because the COVID actually had hit the business. But ultimately, they resolved it through mediation, and I understood myself that there is a huge power in mediation as such, and because this could have gone on for god number of years, God knows how many number of years in the court system or the arbitration system. But an
Hmm.
amount was agreed. But you need a lot of sort of negotiating, option making skills on both the part of arbitrators and also a bit of creativity and flexibility on part of the parties.
Okay. Mhm. Um, can you also comment on how international disputes are dealt with? For example, say a foreign licensor of a technology from an Indian R&D institution. What are the practices? Of course, in terms of what are best practices, what do you suggest? How do you deal with the fact that there are different laws applicable, different processes, and so on?
Yes. So what typically you will have international contracts because parties want a neutral kind of system where their disputes would be resolved. There is a whole different ball game. So there is a New York Convention of 1958 to which many, I mean, more than 170 countries are signatories. So an award which is made by two parties to a negotiating contract arbitration award can be enforced in any of the countries where the award debtor, the party losing party, will have assets. I mean, and you can enforce in parts, some part here, some part there, this that kind of stuff. Usually, the international practice is to pay up on the award. So, last year in November, I represented a Mumbai based company which makes solvent extraction machinery for edible oils. They had supplied machinery to a Russian company, and the dispute was not they it was a repeat business. The dispute was not about the technical part of the machinery. In that it worked. I mean, that's not a problem, but it didn't produce enough oil. The throughput was not as much as expected, and the Indian company said your input is not the right kind of raw material. The oil cake you are giving is not the right kind. The other guy stuck on that it is the right kind. I mean, so
Hmm.
that like I mean the performance parameters were not met. So in that kind of dispute, it was Moscow seated arbitration with an arbitral institution there under the Russian governing law. Contract was in English. Both the parties agreed after the arbitration dispute started to convert into an English only arbitration instead of a Russian and English arbitration because the translation was very expensive. So
Okay.
these are some of these challenges which come up in this
So
system.
for most Indian organizations licensing outside, would you say that the governing law can be a third party governing law which
Yeah,
both agree
so
to?
this is the funny thing. So there are two concepts of seat and governing law.
Yeah.
The three concepts: the governing law of the contract, the governing law of the arbitration, and the law of the seat. I mean,
Mm.
the seats law. So the seat is the legal place whose law will apply to support the whatever is the court support required during arbitration, and also where the first challenge to the award can be done as
Yeah.
such. So that's your the governing law of the arbitration agreement and the law of the seat. But law of the contract by which the substantially the contract would be interpreted would be any law. Parties could choose any law. There is actually a neutral international law which is known as the Unidroit Principles of Contracts, which is like a neutral law, a UN law for contracts. So parties
Mhm.
can choose that also. I mean, nobody says no. There is an international sale of goods kind of law called CISD, to which India is not a signatory. But in my case, Russia was a signatory. So they were the claimant, so they claimed under CISD. But CISD doesn't cover everything. So, for example, it doesn't cover interest.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
I mean, that of all things, I mean, one of the big surprise, United States is a signatory to CISD, but not UK, not India. Usually, US doesn't sign these treaties, but it has signed. Yes.
So, are there documents which are sort of there was a question, I think, here about what are the documents, legally accepted documents in technology negotiation disputes
So,
or disputes?
your core contract of license, I mean, the licensing deal or the licensing contract would be the most important thing as such.
Mm.
Now, you need to make a decision that do you want the pre-contract negotiations to be uh, valid or not, because a lot of time there are MOUs of all kind, and sometimes MOUs have very substantial terms. So then
Mm.
people make a contract which is like an MOU 2, which is sort of a continuation which refers to the earlier MOU and then append some terms or add some terms. Or if you are making a contract which subsumes all prior like negotiations, then you would have what is known as an integration clause, that this all of them is now, all that is gone now, and this is the final contract that we have that will govern everything. I mean,
Mm.
as such. So that's why all the pre-contract correspondence matters a lot, because one of the parties is always going to bring it, even if there is an integration clause, that this is what was discussed and what we had in mind was this. I mean, and ultimately, even if we have written something else in the contract, but this is what parties originally intended.
Mm. There's another question from Sudha Lakshmi, which asks if you have to modify, say, the license agreement, is it better to just have a fresh agreement or have it with modification to the clauses as an additional document or maybe as an addendum for legal purposes? Which one is preferable?
Uh, Obviously, the contract related questions would depend a lot on the contract terms and the subject matter and the industry you are in and practices. I mean, as
Mm.
such. But one thing which is generic across all kinds of contracts, nobody is going to do an amendment to the detriment of their rights, right? I
Mm.
mean, they will not agree to a mutually agreed amendment to something that could be detrimental. So I think if something is presented as some which will work out for both the sides and perhaps would strengthen the arrangement that they already have, or if the other side is enlightened enough to think that yes, we started with this understanding, but that's the basis for that is no longer valid. I
Mm.
mean, you have three phases. You presume that you'll go through the three phases. I mean, of development, clinical trial one, two, three. I mean, that kind of thing. And maybe things, the initial assumptions didn't work out. So, and both the sides now appreciate that, but looking ahead, they want a stronger licensing arrangement, so they want to change it. So they, I mean, they would be open to doing it. I mean, as such.
One
But
is
I
not
think
weaker than the other during mediation, right?
I think having a change of the deal terms during the mediation is usually not like what we have seen. for this reason that you are trying to solve an existing problem. You are not, renegotiating the terms
No,
for
no.
a
Yeah,
new
Hasid.
round, I mean.
Yeah. Asid, I didn't mean that. What I mean
Oh,
is,
sorry.
suppose you have before the dispute arises, you have one situation where there's a new agreement and one versus one where there's a one with addendums and so on and so forth. Uh,
Is
do
it that
they
I
do they
think
stand similar in
I
in
think
the
it would be if the understanding of the party, the delta of the actual reality and the contract, because contract is actually a forecasting document that how things are going to work out.
yeah.
But if that there is a large delta between what is written in the contract and what is actually happening, then I would say it's best to like have a new contract instead of trying
Mm,
to repair the old one. But it's not easy because all these things go through a lot of approvals, and
yeah.
parties hesitate to and they think that addendum or some kind of an amendment would be easy to approve, because whatever is the chain of approvals, they look at only that change in the context of the existing agreement. If it is a fresh agreement altogether, then everybody is going to reevaluate all the variables in the matrix, that what are we getting into afresh.
Mm, okay. There was also a question around. I just finished this one, which is about some of the things you mentioned about arbitration and so on. So Nidhi had a question which was about comparing arbitration with CIRP proceedings and how they differ. And you mentioned something about insurance as well, that it's not covered. Uh, I think you mentioned something like that in the CIRP proceedings.
Yeah, so
Or
the
that's what she says. So
CIRP.
can you elaborate on that? Yeah.
Sure, sure. The CIRP is corporate insolvency resolution process that gets initiated when the company is actually bankrupt. So there is a big difference between bankruptcy and insolvency.
Yeah.
So when you essentially are insolvent, means essentially you cannot pay your debts
Yeah.
what you are supposed to pay. And bankrupt means, like you reach the end of the road. I mean, and it's
Mhm.
not just the question of you not being able to pay your debt. I mean, you have like
Yeah.
essentially no reason
Your
to exist
net
as a
worth
business.
is zero. Yeah.
Yes, 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 or negative.
Negative.
CIRP is initiated under the conditions of IBC, which I don't want to get into detail. But if you cannot pay your debts, essentially somebody will drag you to this thing. The good thing is, if you are a partnership or an individual, government has not notified part 3 of the IBC under which these entities can be taken to IBC. So it's only the companies, incorporated companies, which can be taken to IBC.
Mm.
So there is a lot of people are actually only keeping their arrangement as partnership or solo ownership for this reason that they cannot be dragged into IBC.
Okay. But there are there's a feedback form link in the chat box. Please feel free to type that in. It's a very short form. It helps us improve things. And also, if
Oh,
you can
this is for
suggest the
everybody.
programs, yeah,
Sure.
please put that in as well. There are some questions on National Biodiversity Act, but I think I will leave that aside for now because we have covered that separately. There are some disputes related to that. You make commitments, and NBA approvals are required. You're not able to meet those. Have you seen any of those, Hasid? But briefly, you
I
can talk
haven't I
about that.
haven't come across it, honestly.
Okay, yeah. But I think Dr. Malti Lakshmi Kumaran had covered some of this in one of our previous talks. So maybe you can have a look at that. It's in the YouTube channel with all these videos that I'll let other people go through as well. So Hasid, if there's an academic institution licensing technology or a startup licensing technology, what are the simple things they can do to reduce risks in their via their agreement, right? In terms of
Number one thing that can be done is scoping. That what is the
uh,
scope of the agreement?
yeah.
That what exactly are we licensing?
Okay.
So if it is a particular chemical or a particular process that you're licensing, the big thing is to come up with a definition that would capture the whole of it
Mm,
as such. It's not enough that some technical names are used which both parties would understand, or like some common name is used like to describe it. I think you need to really have a well crafted definition of what is being dealt with, because a tech contract subject matter is nothing physical. It is a either patent rights are there or something it's which is not patented is even more critical to have an exact fair and square definition about it, so which both the parties have agreed and understood and well debated and all that. So scoping is number one challenge. The other thing is, predictable milestone. Yes, one side would like all the revenues to be realizable early. Other side would like to delay it, but that's the risk management part. What you should do is, if you are a licensing body, I think earliest you should be looking at is to recover the costs. I mean, and in recovering the costs, it's not just the direct cost of, like the salaries, I mean the level, the chemicals and the time that has gone, etc., but essentially look at what would be the market cost if this kind of development was given to an outsourced research institution, like, or a company like Battelle or somebody. What would it cost? Because other side actually had an option that they could have gone, if they were the inventors, to somebody like this to come actually make what it is or validate it.
Yeah.
Even because a lot of things, in lot of things, testing costs a lot of things.
Mm.
So if you are like, if you're a startup in the drone zone and you want to test, like the flight stability and the material of the blades and all that thing, the engines and this and that, the testing itself can be prohibitively expensive.
Mm. Okay. The last question, if you don't mind, and just a couple of things. One is, how does one get out of a bad agreement, and what are the clauses one should build in to get out of it? And
Yeah,
also,
one.
there's a question from Akansha on what happens if the company disappears, and what can you do as a remedy?
Yes, yes. So that to get out of the bad agreements, I think the number one thing to do is remain engaged with the text. So don't just sign the agreement and file it and forget it. It's not one of those fire and forget missiles that you fire it and you don't worry where it lands. I mean,
Mm.
as such. So you essentially test it with whatever is really happening. So you had predicted how it would play out. It's a playbook, right, of how the things would play out as per the contract. If it is not playing out, then there are early, like, yellow flags at least, that this is not playing out as what we had agreed. So now if you
Mm.
leave it at that, then it will remain at that. But I think, at least having emails about some of your concerns documented, that would at least, give us fighting material to have something to have to say on your side as such. So that, I think, a constant calibration of reality with the contract terms, constantly
Mm.
mapping contract to realities, is a requirement. You do it maybe quarterly, you do it maybe 6 months, based on what the contracts, the like intensity is. But
Mm.
franchising dispute, etc., you should be looking at it weekly, that what we agreed and what is
Mm.
happening.
Mm. And what happens if the licensee runs away
And license
or
will
the company
disappear.
is not visible? Yeah. Are there mechanisms to, even for
Yeah, so
investors,
our
if investors were
registered.
invested in a company and the company
No,
is not
no. So
available, what do
for
you do?
all the reasons that I said initially, it's not easy to deregister a company in India. You cannot just disappear overnight. The tax guys, the ROC guys, everybody, will start looking for you if you just disappear. I mean, there are shell companies are a reality in every country and all that. They exist, but you can't in India disappear overnight. I mean, they are going to come after you. So in that situation, if you cannot disappear overnight, then I think, you can track and trace people, and you'll not be allowed to deregister yourself so easily. And that's why a lot of people want to deal only with registered companies, not even partnership firms, because partnership firms can disappear overnight, or individuals. Although partnership firms have optional registration. I mean, in the sense, there are certain things only they can do if they are registered, but they others, for you, if you are on the side which is dealing with a partnership firm, you can't force them and say that you should get registered. So it's up to them for their own benefit. But if not, then you are stuck. I mean, because they can
Mhm.
disappear.
Yeah, and probably if if they are in bad shape, then okay, can these organizations register the claim during insolvency
Yes, yes, but you will
proceedings?
get peanuts because
Yeah.
insolvency resolution process as an operational creditor. See, I call IBC as a law by the bank, of the banks, and for the banks. It is for financial institutions. It is not for operational creditors. They
Okay.
the only protected category within that. See, even the government gives up its tax claims. The government's tax claims stand in the same line as ordinary creditors. If they don't file, so the income tax, all authorities are finding out if they are not part of the resolution process, all their claims disappear, which none of these departments are used to. Income tax department is used to giving notices after 5 years, 6 years, whatever, when they remember, right? Customs, all
Yeah.
departments. But they suddenly find that there is a law which requires them to be proactively filing claims against a company which is insolvent, which they have never done in history. So, and then they find that they are late in filing the claims, the company is resolved, and all their claims have disappeared. So, if the statutory claims can disappear, you as a claimant, because your contract with them, you didn't get what they had promised to supply, you are way down the food chain. I mean, only the labor claims, the statutory dues of the labor, like gratuity and bonus and all that, that is taken care of, and that the courts make sure that the labor gets paid. But otherwise, it is only the banks and financial institution who will get paid. You will get peanuts.
So if somebody owes you money, what do you do as a licensee? What is the action to be taken? You can write notices to them, so on and so forth. Can you take
Get
them to the? Can you also do NCLT kind of thing if they don't respond?
taking a company to insolvency is the most dangerous thing to do, because you will not just gut your claim, but you will gut everybody's claims.
Okay.
So, which Ericsson, which was found out by a number of companies who forced these recalcitrant companies to court. They found that not only their claim got gutted, but everybody else's claim, including the government's claim, got gutted.
Hmm.
So all the large insolvencies, particularly for steel companies, all the government claims disappeared.
So the only way is to send notices and take them
You
to
can
court.
ask them
Is it?
for post dated checks, try and, because if it is a privately owned company, they'll do everything possible not to get into IBC. So IBC, when it was brought in as a law, didn't have a settlement provision. But what happened is, when people send IBC notice, by the way, it can only be for an undisputed debt. So if there is a disputed debt, you cannot raise an IBC claim.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the companies, then what they did was they created disputes. Now they've become very smart. Everybody creates a dispute so that there is no undisputed debt as such. But if you are able to find an undisputed debt and threaten them to take them to IBC and eventually take them to IBC, now there is a settlement provision where companies usually pay. And I think IBBI has published statistics, because IBBI, the regulator, actually publishes very good statistics. I think they are about one third of these like things are like settled by company
Okay.
making payment. That all right, you want to take us IBC, we will pay you off, and then we'll deal with other creditors when they drag us. And that's what happened in Byju's. I mean,
Yeah.
in many like Reliance Telecom and other insolvencies, bankers said we don't want to take you to IBC. But Ericsson, who was an equipment supplier, took them to IBC. Ericsson got its pound of flesh. Everybody else got gutted in all the lenders.
Okay, so I think it's 5:15 now, so I'll
Yes.
stop here. I'll pass it on to Mugdha. Those who have not filled up the feedback form, please do. Thank you so much, Hasit. Very nice talking to you as usual. Over to you, Mugdha.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Hasid, for your time. I know are traveling, but thank you for making time for this session, which you had committed. So we hope to host you in the fourth wave also. So as we have announced, this is the last session in this third wave. We look ahead to plan quite a few interesting topics in the fourth wave. Do give us a suggestion of these topics in the feedback form. So please do fill up the feedback form before you leave this session. Thank you, Hasit, once again. And with this, we close today's session.
Sure. Thank you,
Thank
Mugdha.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Premnath. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Bye. Good
Thank
night.
you. Bye bye.